All right. Good afternoon, everybody. That was to you all in the room, too. Good afternoon over there. All right. So, is that okay for me to be hearing an echo? Is that right? Echo?
Hear it on that side of the room.
Is that okay? Okay. All right, I'll just act like I don't hear echo. So for those joining online, I will introduce myself and then turn it over to my fabulous partner. I don't want to say in crime. What's another word? In progress. My fabulous partner in progress. My name is Malka Monger, and I'm the Associate Vice President of Human Resources and Chief Human Resources Officer.
Good afternoon, Diane Forbes Berthoud. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am the inaugural Vice President for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion.
Yes. Thank you all for joining us. Let me just say for joining us and also for participating in the survey. We have been making our rounds, really trying to make sure that we communicate the results. We have now met with all of our schools and offices. We received very comprehensive reports from our consultant who we worked with. So we have now met with all the schools and offices. We met with a lot of our stakeholder groups. We received great participation, great feedback from you all. So we do want to say thank you for your participation. Thank you for encouraging, if you did that, thank you for encouraging those who did participate to participate as well. We're really excited to share the results with you. So I will start off. Know that if you have questions, you can use the mics for those in the room. You can use the mics, step up to the mic, and periodically I will try to stop and say, are there questions about that? And then for those who are online, Alex will be sending you messages prompting questions as well. So please let us know if you think of a question after this session or a comment, or if you have a suggestion, please feel free to shoot Diane or myself an email. We have met again with a lot of people. We have a long list of things to discuss for the next time around. We know that if you were around then, we also took the Gallup poll survey. And so again, there's always suggestions for improvement, things that we can do different or better. So if you have those suggestions, please let us know that as well. All right, well, I am going to jump right in.
All right, so this is how we will proceed today. Thank you again for coming. So Malka is going to provide for you the background of the instrument so you understand more about what was presented before as background. In 2016, some of you who were here took the Gallup survey, and also in 2019. So this is a newer instrument to our campus. About 20 universities across higher education so far are using this. So we have multiple points of comparison across institutions our size, those with health institutes, those that have a research component, those that don't. So we can see where are we among other higher education institutions. We're going to present the overall results and interpret the survey results in the context of equity, diversity, and inclusion. We'll also introduce a new measure, which is the Net Promoter Score, that tells us something about people's likelihood to recommend UMB, i.e., do you like working here, and how satisfied you are working here. And Malka will explain more about the drivers of satisfaction. What makes us happy, feel like we belong, or satisfied at work. And then what's new to this instrument is specific interpersonal behaviors related to meeting, relationship dynamics, and very important, which people have asked us, now what? We've taken the survey, what happens next? And Malka will go through those as well. Over to you.
All right, thank you. So if you've been around long enough, regardless of what employer you work with, I'm sure you've taken, whether it's a satisfaction survey, customer service survey. One of the things that was important to us, sometimes surveys focus primarily on satisfaction, but we wanted to focus both on engagement and satisfaction. Satisfaction being, again, the extent to which your employee contract, those things that we feel are needed, right? The hygiene factors such as pay, benefits, job training, safety, and tools schools, and then engagement, where it takes it beyond just being satisfied, where we feel connected to what we do, right? We feel like we can bring our entire selves to our job. We are committed, we are passionate, we are advocating, we are promoting our employer. We are able to bring, again, or invest our best selves, and we say the heart, mind, and soul into the work that we do. This is important because we know that it's satisfaction that creates that foundation for engagement. So we want to make sure, again, one of our primary goals with this survey was making sure that we focus then on both. So just a couple of things that I want to highlight as far as what makes our survey different this time around. Number one, that it was not just confidential, but it was anonymous. I remember that I received a couple of emails from people that had lost their ID, and they were just saying, hey, can you send it back to me again? And we couldn't, because every person had a unique identifier that was sent out. And so we actually had to recreate. Sometimes we had to say, can you look in your outbox? Can you look in your drafts to see if maybe you can find it again? So it was anonymous. Even the people who looked at and did the survey as far as the results did not know who responded to what. It was also specifically designed and validated for higher ed. Again, this survey particularly was designed 20 years ago and is then validated every 5 years. It's also multidimensional. So you'll see as we start talking about the survey that we looked at 6 different dimensions of satisfaction through the statistical factor analysis that was done. Again, we didn't want to just focus on overall satisfaction, but really trying to focus on specific areas for the survey. Number 4, that there was customizable reporting. So all of our schools and offices received an executive summary report, very comprehensive. I believe that it was about 13 pages long. All of the departments underneath the schools that had 5 or more employees also received a comprehensive report. So we wanted to make sure that we provided detailed information based upon the results that we got from our schools and offices, and then also our departments. Number 5, that it includes our equity, diversity, and inclusion questions. So again, that we were able to work with EDI practitioners to develop those questions, and that was important to this process as well. Diane mentioned the Employee Net Promoter Score, and this looks at, again, we'll talk more about this later, but this is modeled specifically for higher ed and looks at both satisfaction and likelihood to recommend, how those two intersect, so that we can then look at engagement or disengagement of our employees and look at where that level is for our employees. And then number 7, that we have actionable reports, and it also identifies drivers of satisfaction. So the why, for a more complete story, where we're able to look at that, where we're able to say these are very clearly the areas that should be worked on for your school or office. All right, so let's jump into the meat of the report. Again, this was specifically for our staff. There was a faculty survey that was sent out, I believe it was March, April. So our survey period, as you recall, was for September the 20th through October the 7th. When we asked our provider, what numbers should we be targeting, because we also know that we're quite competitive around here, what's that number that we should be shooting for that positions us well as a university to say we're kind of sitting good? And the number that we were given was 20%. When looking at peer institutions, we want to be at least at that 20% level, and we're at 36%. So of course, when you think 0 to 100, it's like, and we want to continue doing better. We want to work on it, because we know that when we have more people participating in our survey, we have better information, we have more feedback, we're able to provide more feedback and better feedback to our schools and offices. So again, we invited a little over 4,400 people were invited, 1,600 responses with the 36% participation rate. Of those, 75% responded that they are either satisfied or extremely satisfied with working at UMB. And then we also looked at 74. We see that when we asked a question around retention for the department, how many can see themselves in the same department in 1 to 2 years time period, 74% said that they could. As we have made our way around and talking to the schools and departments, one of the things that we've heard is, can we also ask a question about university? There are people that might be using where they are now as a stepping stone and going to a different department. So maybe they don't see themselves in the same department, but they want to continue being in the university. So we will add that question next time around as well. And then what you see is to the right, the highest and lowest scoring results. So supervisors being supportive of personal issues, staff understanding how to use the tools that are available, staff being treated with respect, staff understanding how their job contributes to the mission, and the fact that they enjoy working with our coworkers. Those were our highest scoring areas. And then our lowest scoring areas were adequate staffing in the department, total compensation, career advancement, staff feeling like they don't have a voice, and appropriate stress levels. I will comment that when we look at some of our lowest scoring, and you'll be able to see this as we go along, that the adequate staffing and the total compensation were actually the lowest scoring for all of our schools and offices. There was not one school or office that we met with that did not have those two as lowest scoring. Again, you'll be able to see those scores as we go along. And then what we have, when we talked about those drivers of satisfaction, what's most important to people as it relates to satisfaction, these are the things that rose to the top as far as the things that we want to continue to build our work on. Our department staff feeling welcomed, and these were the second bullet point, the community excellence and professional. Those were the questions that were centered around our core values, which we did score high on. So kudos to our employees and our supervisors who've really tried to integrate those core values into the fabric of who we are and what we do. Our employees feeling like they have sufficient freedom, being treated with respect, and being able to make recommendations without fear. Again, these are things we want to keep up the great work on. And then those things that we really want to focus as far as where we want to concentrate our efforts, total compensation, appropriate stress level, staff issue resolution, feeling valued, and being recognized, better methods of recognition. So while the slide before, because I know that we have had this question, you don't see some of these in the other slides. This is straight by just the mean scores, highest scoring and lowest scoring. When you get to, again, primary opportunities, these are the things that are driving satisfaction for our employees. So these are the things that rose to the top for these areas. Okay. And I do want to just pause, because I did bring the questions with, because I know when we say all department or total compensation. So when we look at total compensation, it was question number 45, which says, I am satisfied with my total compensation, including salary, benefits, and retirement. Feeling valued was question number 52, which simply says, I feel valued by my department. The recognition of better methods was question number 30, which says people in my department are recognized for finding better ways of doing things. All righty. So we wanted to show you this because this provides a snippet of the reports that our departments and offices or schools and offices receive. So there is an executive summary that has all of the information. So you can see there on your left, number one, where it has both the influential strengths, the primary opportunities. It breaks down the overall satisfaction on the right top, from the strongly disagree all the way up to agree, which coincides again with what we talked about initially, the satisfaction rate, that 74-75% satisfaction rate. And then in the middle of the page is where you see the 6 dimensions of satisfaction, and it'll be color coded, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But those right there are the 6 dimensions of satisfactions that were surveyed. Number 2 is the employee net promoter score, which we'll get into as well, which you can see, again, looks at satisfaction as well as likelihood to recommend. So there is that report included, and then there is the mean scores. So this just shows a snippet of 2 of the dimensions, the satisfaction and department, but each of the schools and offices received all the mean scores for all 60 questions. And then at the bottom, there was also a report that talks about the, again, influential strengths, primary opportunities and strengths. There is also the correlational analysis. So there is a scatter plot that's included for those departments that had 25 or more, where you can really see the explanation for those drivers of satisfaction with the mean scores, so they can identify those drivers. Okay. All right, so now we get into kind of where we are sitting as a university. So again, these are the 6 dimensions. It's color coded, and you will see that throughout the report. So again, we're looking at overall satisfaction with UMB. So that connection to overall satisfaction with UMB, department, mission, and goals. So the first one is really how employees feel about their connection to overall UMB or to UMB as a university. And then the rest of the other 5 dimensions really is their connection with their departments. So connection with their department mission and goals, department effectiveness, supervisor effectiveness, employee effectiveness, and then there are several questions around diversity and climate. You can see here that the lowest scoring, even though we're in the good area, because if you see right there where it is color coded, this is not a pointer. I need a pointer so I can still show you. But if you can see at the top where 4.30 and above is excellent. So that would be the dark blue. The 3.60 to 4.29, we're falling in the good area, all the way down to the pink. So if there was any pink, dark pink, that 3.0 and below, again, you're going to see those areas that where some improvement is needed. But overall, you can see as a university that we are doing good. Even though you see some lower scores, we are still in the good area with the satisfaction or connection to overall UMB at 3.76. And then you see the highest scoring with the supervisor effectiveness, that score being 4.10, followed by the diversity and climate questions with a 4.07. High scoring supervisor effectiveness, some of those were around supervisor effectiveness. I have sufficient freedom to decide how to best perform my work. Work is assigned equitably in the department. My performance is evaluated fairly. And then just overall satisfaction for that lower scoring area. Some of those questions were centered around staff members at UMB value my contributions. I understand how my job performance positively contributes to UMB's mission. UMB promotes a work environment where all people are welcome. So just to give you a sense of some of the questions that were asked there. And then you have the retention question, again, whether employees can see themselves in the same department in 1 to 2 years time period. So you see there, and that's that 73% that we mentioned at the start, with just the 11% of our employees who responded saying that they cannot see themselves in the same, or disagree that they can see themselves in the same department in 1 to 2 years time period. All right, so now we get into the 6 dimensions, mean scores for all 6 of the dimensions. We wanted you to be able to see, so we kind of have a snippet first, starting with the first 3 dimensions. Again, we already said that it's color coded, so you can see kind of how we're doing from those areas in the dark pink where there is improvement needed, all the way up to where we are in the excellent area of the 4.3 and above. There are 2 columns because when the schools and offices get their report, so the UMB all is the scores, the mean scores for UMB, but the schools and departments will see their overall mean scores on the left-hand side. And then if there are department reports, it will have their overall school mean scores on the right-hand side, and then their department on the left-hand side. So what you see here, again, you can see overall invited, those that responded, and then the response rate. You can see that there is some pink, and then the blue, again, it's color coded. Once we get into taking the survey, you'll see the year-to-year results. So when we take it the next time, you'll see 2025 in the right and 2022, or whatever that year. No, 2022, or 24, no, 20. Yes, 2 years. So you'll see that in both of those columns. So again, you have the dimension satisfaction with UMB, department mission and goals, and then department effectiveness. So you can see, this is where I'm going to ask for a little bit of audience participation. Those who are online, you're welcome to look. I'm going to ask you for your observations based upon what we've said. Again, what do you observe between the blue and the pink? Where are we doing well and where do we need to improve? Anybody? Can you, I'm sorry, Diane, can you give her that microphone? Do we have, you good and loud? I don't know if we'll hear it online though. We're good? So can you just pat, yeah. I wanted it to be conversational. I feel like it's like really formal, you having to stand up. And are we able to pass the mic around versus somebody standing in front of it? Okay, go ahead.
So definitely we need to hire more people. I would say that is where we are struggling.
Does it say we need to hire more people, or does it just say adequate staff? That's what you read into it. We need more.
And then
adequate
staff members as well.
Oh, right? That's how you read that. The people who adequately do their job?
Yeah.
Okay. And more people to do the job. All right, so you can see that clearly dark pink, 2.92, and you can see of the 3 dimensions that's listed here, that is the lowest score, right? Any other observations? You can take the mic off. Can we take the mic off?
So I have a couple of comments in the chat area that I want
to share. Go ahead.
No one's put a question in Q&A, and I want to remind everyone, if you want to speak, please put your question in Q&A. But we have people who've said, yes, it looks like we need to hire more people. I think the market is driving the adequate staffing. Not sure how UMB could change that. And maybe more training for employees. And one more thing, the light pink areas are probably driving the dark red area. I'm not sure what that means.
Oh, because career advancement is needed, or people feeling like they need to have a voice, then maybe they're rating the adequate staffing lower. Is that maybe what that person might be saying? All right. So I'm sorry, was there anything else before so here's the thing. It's always really easy for us to look at, yep, we need to work on that area and we're doing that. But one of the things that I want to encourage you all to do as well is look at the blue. Because I know that as employees, as supervisors, that we've worked hard over the last couple of years. And what has happened, think about what's happened in our environment over the last couple of years that might be driving some of that blue. So you can see the dark blue, the highest rated here is at 4.37. Employees feeling like that they are contributing to their department's mission, right? Is high scored. Followed by, what is it? I saw 4.28 right above that, understanding the department's mission. So that's an area to look at as well. Let's move on. All right, second set of dimensions: supervisory effectiveness, employee effectiveness, and the questions around diversity and climate. Observations. Anything online, Alex? Okay. What stands out immediately to me is that when I look at the supervisor effectiveness area, there is no pink. When I look at the diversity and climate, there is no pink. And one of the things that as we were talking to the consultant that they made clear is that this is like not just happenstance, right? There's things that are being done at the supervisor level, right? People feeling like they're being effective they're saying that they feel like their supervisor is effective, and that doesn't happen overnight and is not happenstance. There's good work going on, and that's very intentional, right? Conversely, you do see that there are the couple of areas that we talked about, the appropriate stress level and total compensation. Those are falling in the employee effectiveness area. So just generally speaking, when we looked at all of the questions, about 20% of the UMB areas surveyed scored in the excellent range. About 67% fell in the good range, and then about 13% fell in the marginal range. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Diane, who's going to talk a little bit more about just comparisons with the Gallup and then our employee net promoter score. If you want to stand, I can switch it for you.
Thank you. Sure. All right. So thanks, Malka. So some questions that we received, and as we were doing the analysis in preparation last year was, well, what happened to the surveys that we filled out for those of you who've been working here for 6 years or more? So we were able to codify from 16, 19, and 22, how we're comparing as a university among staff. Some things to note here are that in 2016, the two populations of staff and faculty were not disaggregated. So what you're looking at in the blue is a combination of faculty and staff. In 2019, which is the orange, they were able to separate the two. So you're only looking at staff. And in 22, you're only looking at staff. So statisticians out there, researchers will say, what are we actually looking at? We wanted to give you some comparison. Generally speaking, across these measures, overall satisfaction, feeling valued, supervisor giving praise, participates in decisions. Overall, we've increased in all of our measures, at least looking at our the questions that are the exact same or similar. So there was a question in the Gallup survey that said, overall I'm satisfied at UMB. And in the past, that score was 3.67, and it has increased to 3.85. All are treated fairly in my school or department. My supervisor is supportive. That jumped quite a bit. And I think there was a core values question here as well, or department mission. So a question to you all. Either one or two things have remained the same. I don't think there was any major decrease. What do you think has contributed to some of those changes? Between 16 and 23, something major happened, COVID. How do you think, so I was hired during COVID and some of you were here before. How do you think the university handled that in terms of work-life balance, flexibility, and so on? You share your experiences with us. What do you think changed, or did something happen that made those improvements possible? Some heads nodding. Look at words to you. Anybody online or anybody in the room physically?
I think that during that period, there were a lot of communications from senior leadership out to the campus community on a regular basis. And there's opportunities to provide feedback and suggestions, and the voices were heard. And I think that helped bring those scores up.
Thank you so much. Alex.
Good point. Chanel, is you there?
Hi, Chanel.
Hello, Diane, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Oh, amazing, amazing. I was just sharing in the chat when we were looking at the different questions and which one showed opportunity for improvement and which ones we were doing well. Not that I'm trying to look for, issues with the blue area, but I do think it's an important perspective to consider who was the majority voice that is being reflected in the overall response. Because I think when you look at the data a little bit more disaggregated by demographic, you may see those questions reflected a bit differently.
Thank you for that. So the analysis we have in 22 is a bit more detailed, so we'll share that today. We can certainly go back to look at, because we have by school, but we don't have all the demographic groups. So we can certainly go back, and Chanel is Associate Dean for Diversity and Pharmacy. So she is certainly leading in that area to ask us, well, which populations are represented by the overall stats we're sharing here. Great question, Chanel. Another comment, question? Yes, Alex, another one? Please. Go ahead, please.
So I was looking at the supervisor ratings that we had, and they were all great. And it's interesting because they don't necessarily track with what I have heard from various staff on campus. And in my experience, many people who are unhappy with their supervisor / culture / whatever will not fill out these surveys because they don't believe they're anonymous. And when they have had backlash in the past for these things or have known people who have had that. So, I mean, it's great, but it doesn't necessarily fit with my my experience speaking with various staff.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And as Malka mentioned, this is UMB all. We have presented to 7 schools and scores of departments and units. They don't all look as blue as this. So want to let you know, absolutely hear you, and the numbers do meet out what we are looking at. There are some departments that are, I would say, a third or more pink or red, and that department meaning 25 or more. And so we actually do see that when speaking to all unit heads. And where we are now, Malka will talk about this. Both the DEI officers and the HR officers and leads have been in touch to talk about what are those action steps to change those areas where people might say don't feel supported or haven't been given professional development opportunities or don't feel my workload is equitable, et cetera. But this is overall, this is 2,000 employees as a whole. Chanel's question is taken, and so is our colleague here. Would we look by demographic group, by unit, and by department, we see a different story in some areas. So thank you for that observation. Dak?
Well, I actually have a question. As related to this point, that appropriate stress is not scoring as well as, for instance, supervisor effectiveness, which is good, then what structural is going on? And COVID could be one example, right, where stress is outside of the university and when the patient stress can. Is this after effects? Or is there some other, you might have out the breakout data that in a more nuanced way we can understand why there's that disjuncture, whether it's self-selection bias that the last person mentioned, or some other structural item.
No, and I'm sorry.
I was going to make one quick observation. Some of it is disciplinary and by school. I won't call any out, but depending on if you have clinical, research, external, environmental related things, some of our comments will show some of them. We've seen that.
Right. And then I also just wanted to comment. So remember, we just have the scores here, right? And I read some of the questions, but what we can't tell is, okay, was everybody thinking the same thing when they read the question? So just like even a great example is what you said about adequate staffing, not only people being able to adequately do their job, but having enough, right? Did people read it a different way? So one of the things that we have encouraged supervisors and deans and VPs as they are digging into this information with their employees and working on strategies is to talk to your people. What does it mean to you? How can we do better or differently, right? But let's make sure when we say total compensation, what does that mean to you? When we talk about appropriate stress level, are we on the same page as a department and what that means and how we can change it and what we can do different? So we're definitely pushing that. So thank you for bringing that up.
So we can keep moving with the comparison. I think there's one more. So this score is a little nifty thing for those who might be interested in this type of score. What it helps us to think about is how likely are you to recommend UMB and how satisfied you are. You can be one, you're likely to recommend, but not really satisfied here. Or you may be likely you are satisfied, but you don't talk a lot about the university. So what we have here, top right, is the number of participants who, the raw number, 198, 229, and so on, who are likely to recommend the university. Bottom left are those who are not likely to recommend and they are not satisfied. The net promoter score is the difference between the two. The way I like to think about it is you have 10 people in a boardroom, you're discussing an idea. 8 people are all for it, 2 aren't. The 2 kind of net, the other out. So top right, the percentage of people who are likely to recommend, if you look at the score here, it says 64 ENPS, 69.4% of our employees, close to 70% of our employees are likely to recommend and are also satisfied employees. Bottom left in the red are those who are not very satisfied, not likely to recommend, and that percentage is 5%. Difference between 69.4 and 5.1% is 64. So the green arrow tells us that we're in that good range. Most of our employees are happy here and likely to recommend. I ask you to look at the whole chart because it tells us about engagement and satisfaction. And the red circled and the green circled, and there's a group in the middle. If you were to advise Malka as Chief Human Resources Officer, and we were to look at the numbers there, who do you think, this is your perspective, who do you think we need to pay attention to in terms of getting them more engaged and more excited and wanting to rah-rah about UMBs, more people will come to work and study here? Is there any group that we need to pay more or less attention to from your perspective? Which one? The ones in the middle. Adrian says the ones in the middle. Would you like to explain more, or you just want to give it to somebody else?
I think anytime anybody thinks why they can't.
Okay, so the middle group of people, they could go either way. They could be getting ready to leave. They could be getting ready to say, yeah, UMB. Well, what would that take? It's a small number, but still a very important number, maybe about 100 people or so. The point here is we're in the good range, on the lower end of good for those who are likely to promote. So we're in a good spot. 2 years from now, or whenever we take this again, let's see how we look there. But generally speaking, among other institutions, we're in that good range. Okay. All right, so this gets to Chanel's question and other questions that I'm sure you might have. It is wondering now, well, by demographic group, how do groups compare? Again, this is across the whole university. We've done this for offices and we've done this for schools. So we're able to capture data by those who identify as women, those who identify as male, and those with diverse gender identities. So the same questions that Malka reviewed before, we're able to then see, do those who identify as women in 22, male, or different gender identities have different experiences, higher or lower levels of satisfaction, and does it look pretty much like the rest of the university? So I'll pause to just give you a moment. If you're more into numbers, you can take a quick look at the numbers. If you are better with colors, you can also make some observations there. The majority of the participants were women, 900 plus. Close to 400, those who identify as men, and those with diverse gender identities. There are about 8 different categories. So those were collapsed because it was 2 here, 5 there, 7 there. So the group has to be, I think it's larger than 10 for us to be able to see it here. Any observations? Distinctions across gender. The same items now disaggregated by gender. Give you about 5 seconds. Yes, Ayamba.
So it seems to me that the males are having a much better experience than everyone else on the
Yeah, essentially. So whether you go by color coding, there's more blue there, dark blue and blue, very few pink. Interestingly, Ayamba, under diversity and climate, they're happiest with the diversity programs. Yay for our office, but I'd be interested to know, our office and all that's happening across campus. I'd be interested to know what makes that more of the case for those who identify as men. Then if we look by the raw mean scores, even when it's in the blue range, those who identify as women, even if you look under supervisor effectiveness, all of those scores, or almost all, are lower than those who identify as men. So that is a great observation. And in the summary statistical analysis, that's actually one of the findings. So when people would like to know, well, what kinds of programs should we plan, or why are these kinds of things important? It's important to note that not everyone experiences the campus in the same way, and that those who identify as women, for the most part, are not having as positive an experience, although overall for the university is positive. Other observations? Okay, let's keep moving. Oh, yes, please.
Question.
Do you have a sense of what might have led to the discrepancy in the numbers of people who responded?
Discrepancy as in why the number isn't as high for those who identify as men? Or...
Yeah. Like why so many more of those who identify as female might have responded than those who identify as male?
I am not sure.
This was the case in the faculty experience survey as well. So it could be that women generally are more engaged, have more to say, but we're also, women are the larger number in when we look at our dashboard. They're, in the US work, which is like 52%, at UMB, it's probably 60-something% or something like that. So there are also more women working at UMB at all levels. So that's a great question, observation though. All right, same gender analysis and comparison with specific interpersonal behaviors, such as excluded you, ignored you in a conversation, made derogatory remarks about race, ethnicity, and gender, sexual orientation, made derogatory comments about sexual orientation, made you minimize various characteristics of your culture, for example, language or dress to fit in. So these questions are also newer to UMB, and the numbers you see here aren't the mean scores in a 5-point scale. What they are, it measures the frequency, the number of times this has happened to you in the last year. So when you see 1, that's actually a good thing, as opposed to seeing 5 when 5 before a higher score was better. So using the color code before, if you're inclined and you're able to see the colors in these ways, blue and dark blue is actually positive, as in ignored you in a conversation. So how many times has that happened? On average, it's 1.48 for those who identify as women, 1.42, and so forth. And in some cases, you'll see light blue when somebody says, I was condescending to you or made jokes at your expense or interrupted or spoke over you. So those across the entire campus and across all genders, those are actually low in occurrence. We would say 1 times too many, but we make mistakes. So this is overall, again, in some units and divisions, this is actually not the report, right? So this is the overall at UMB. All right, keep moving. All right, so now looking at race ethnicity. People were able to self-identify as those who identified as white, as Black, Latine, Asian, Pacific Islander, American Indian, Alaskan Native, or multi-ethnic, 2 or more races. And the same satisfaction questions, and then people responded based on that, and you see the distribution on the right. 800 plus people identified as white responded, 400 plus those who identify as Black, Latino, Latine, 41, API, 123, American Indian, 8, multi-ethnic, i.e. 2 or more races, 38. Observations. So you can either go by the color code or you can come forward. Yes, Alex. You can put your hand down, Alex. I see you. Oh, Katie's got the mic.
I want to be sure to mention a point that to your earlier information that someone passed on. Anonymous attendee wrote, my first thought is that the men who take the survey are probably in better paid positions and are listened to more and more likely to be administrative and lower paid positions. We've had other comments, little brief comments about, considering who's responding and the positions they're in. And if you take a look maybe at the salary level of the people who are responding and that sort of thing. So
that's a great observation. That is a great observation. Thank you.
And thank you for the suggestion. I know that we've had that from a couple of other groups to do a separation, non-exempt, exempt salary level, because it does make a difference in your responses. So we have that on our list as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Observations about the demographic groups disaggregated by race and ethnicity. Where do we see more blue and where do we see more pink and red if we want to go to slight colors? Right, so in our summary and what was shared with us as well as our own observation, overall, those who identify as white respondents and those who identify as Asian or Pacific Islander are having a more positive experience at UMB and are more satisfied at UMB than those from the other groups, those who identify as Black, Latino, American Indian, or multi-ethnic. Those means are lower in score almost across most of the satisfaction dimensions. Surprising, Ayamba? You're not surprised? Ayamba and others said no, not at all. Any comments online, Alex? Yes.
I'm sorry, wrong person. Christiane Pollock surprised how much pink we see for American Indians, and Fiamma Romero said most blue in the API and white, she noticed.
Correct. Thank you, Fiamma, and thank you also our other colleague. Okay, so there are 8 respondents in American Indian, Alaskan Native. So statistically, when there are smaller groups, any distinction, even with 1 respondent or 2, will show us higher. But it does say to us there may be others, right, who didn't respond to this that may be having similar experiences. What we did in our office is to have some listening sessions with various groups that are smaller. We had an Indigenous group, and we can have more, so we can learn more about that for sure. But yes, the overall finding is those who identify as white or Asian are report higher satisfaction scores than others. Okay, we can move on. Same racial ethnic groups. However, now it is with the same interpersonal behaviors, and we see that the stark distinctions again with the 8 respondents. Still important that their occurrences of negative behaviors of condescension or feeling excluded or being kept out of the loop, their reporting happens more in their group than in other groups. Okay, thank you. Okay, then we were also able to look at differences across sexual orientation, heterosexual and LGBTQ, and we see here 1,200 plus, those who identify as heterosexual and those who identify in the survey LGBTQ, 145 respondents. There are some areas where both groups, I think there are about 4 or 5 responses where both groups are in the paint. So there aren't clear distinctions there. However, measures department goals and valuing staff contributions and also valuable training. Those who identify in the LGBT community have made observations that it's not as positive for them or they're not as satisfied with those areas. Any other observations? Okay, we can keep moving. I don't know how we are on time, so I want to make sure you get to action steps. Okay, are we good? Okay, thank you. All right, so here also across both groups, low occurrences of some of the things we talked about before, being excluded, being ignored in a conversation, no stark distinctions across the whole university, again, by department or unit. We've seen some other distinctions which we have been dealing with by area. Okay, we can keep moving, and then I think disability was next, maybe not. Okay, all right, so these are the overall findings in text. We talked about the response rate. If you look at the 4th bullet, 20% of our UMB area surveyed in the excellent range, that is something to celebrate. 67% scored in the good range and 13% in the marginal range. Again, this is overall, right? So generally speaking, as a university, we're doing well in terms of staff experience by population, demographic group. We just talked about those problematic areas. And in some schools or units, there are some areas that need attention for sure. Top satisfaction drivers, Malka covered those. I do want us to celebrate this piece because there's been a lot of great leadership and work. Many of you were on that committee. All UMB areas, all. Right, so that's 2,000, almost 2,000 employees scored in the good or excellent range for my department practices UMB core values. So this is more than a poster on a wall. It's about well-being and sustainability, equity and justice, and so on. And there was improvement in almost all the areas from the last survey to this one and from the 2016 to this survey. Female respondents scored lower than male respondents. We just talked about that. Black, Latino, American Indian, multi-ethnic respondents scored generally lower in satisfaction items than those who identified as white or Asian or Pacific Islander. And multi-ethnic respondents scored the lowest in all satisfaction items. That is those who identified as having 2 or more races. LGBTQ respondents generally scored lower in satisfaction in all dimensions, except supervisor effectiveness. So these are the general findings. So what we're going to talk about now, what does this mean? What do we do next? What have we been doing since then? And what will happen in the next 6 or so months? Malka will talk through action steps and further items. Okay. A question, Yamba?
Yeah, right there. So, question in terms of participation in the survey. So, I see that like we had an increase in core values, and everyone's on board with that. But we're still just at a little over 1,000 folks filling out the survey. So, what could we do to increase that? Because similar to what someone said that's online, I have heard different things than what's being presented here. And I know it's because the individuals that are sometimes having these problems don't feel comfortable sharing this information maybe. But I feel like we see this and we think this is actually where we are. Mm-hmm. But in reality, we
I don't think we are there. I don't think we are as good as it looks on paper. And I know that's because we don't have everyone's voice. So what can we do to kind of increase that? Is it like each dean, I don't know, each school is responsible for making sure at least 70% of their staff members are completing this? Are we going department to department? But I think it's really important for us to genuinely make change to have at least 80% of the voices.
Yeah, this is a great observation. So what I'm hearing and what you're talking about, that trust is a big factor, one in even filling the survey out, but also what's the point? Nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to change. And is this accurate? First part is, this is in the aggregate. It's a little bit more than 1,000. It's close to 1,700. The second part is, I think Malika's leadership is amazing. And what we're doing here is newer to us. When you think that, I think the student survey, and there was another survey before that was in the teens or less in response rate for some of the very reasons. So to be at 36 is great. I'm from an institution where 69 was on the lower end, but that's after administering it for 15 years with steps in offices like HR and EDI and institutional effectiveness. So we are continuing great work and building on that. And we are now going to talk about accountability for the units and areas where, yay, thumbs up, people really feel like they're doing well. We're going to build on that, whether adequate staffing, funding, or whatever for that unit. And for those that aren't doing as well, same thing, what kinds of training, professional development, and so forth. So this is where the rubber meets the road, and Malika will talk about those steps. But great points about trust, because I'm not going to build it if I don't think you're going to do anything. Great observation. Okay.
And I also, I'm sorry, just before I get there, I do want to mention, I think that I had said at the very beginning, I received a lot of emails, right, about the survey. Some of those emails, lots of those emails were, are you going to do anything with the results? We didn't see our department results. We don't think that, some of the skepticism that you're talking about, and rightly so, because when I asked around as I came in the door, it was like, I don't remember seeing results. It wasn't shared with the university. Our school didn't do anything. Our office. So for us, in working together on this, it was important. The very first thing that we did was, again, meet with our senior leaders and talk about how important this was and the accountability piece. So we got the buy-in from senior leaders. We met with the deans and VPs, right? And it was, we need to put our money where our mouth is, because people are skeptical, right? People aren't participating because they don't think that we're going to do anything with the results. So we were really adamant about getting that buy-in. So let me just, I'll pause, but I do want to say that in the end that we have some steps that we are focused on to really help with that, which I'll talk about. I do want to hear some of the comments that you have.
I just want to point out very quickly, we have a lot of comments online about transparency. Let me bring in Fiamma Romero, who can ask one of those questions. Fiamma, you've waited a long time. Go ahead.
Okay. Yes, hi, do you hear me? No.
I have to speak up a little bit.
All right, do you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Hi, everyone. I just had a question. I appreciate all the transparency with presenting the data to the university-wide community now, but you've mentioned a few times that departments know their scores. Will departments be either voluntarily or be required to share the department level data with staff so that we know at the department level whether we feel this data is reflective of our experiences?
That is one of the expectations that we set, that the schools were meeting with their teams, with their departments to share the data, because in turn, we're expecting them to give us something back that addresses what they've done. So absolutely.
Thank you. Is there a timeline for that? I just want to make sure that it's not something that already happened and it only happened with senior leaders.
So I can tell you, and I don't know if you can see the screen. So we have a timeline. There are some schools and offices that have said, we have this, and this coming up, we're behind. So do know that we've said it, and they have communicated that they are working on it. I know that there was some things that happened with one school, and it's like, hey, but we still need you to come back out and we still need you to talk. But I do know that everyone is working on it. That is the message that they have given back to us. I don't know if you've heard it, but that is the message that we have received, that everyone is working on it. We have, again, we've kind of made our rounds. We also met with the EDI officers, with our HR group, because we know that a lot of leadership, with the deans, AVPs, chairs are going to the HR leaders, some of the, and also the EDA officers. So one of the things that we have done, we created a template because we wanted to make sure that we had consistent information from everyone. And we've said, based on your results, we need you to identify what those top 3 scoring areas are and primary opportunities and influential opportunities, and then also lowest scoring and primary opportunities. What 3 opportunities, also making sure that you are looking through that EDI lens, right? So when we looked at the experiences, when we looked at our demographics and the experiences for those 4 demographic groups, how are you also integrating the experiences of those groups into the strategies that you are going to be identifying for your lowest and highest scoring areas? And we've said that they are supposed to have those templates completed. So like I've had to do the same thing with my group. They're supposed to have those templates completed and to their dean or VP by the end of June. And then for the dean or VP to review and have it to my office by the end of July. We will then compile the information and submit it to the president's office. So again, we are taking concrete steps to make sure that that accountability piece is there. Again, I've had different groups in schools and offices reach out and say, we get it, but we want you to come and talk to us. So we've made our rounds. We've had conversations around strategies, around things that they can do. One of the things that we're also looking at is, so like the total compensation piece and adequate staffing was on there, right? And like we've heard, there's not much we can do about it. Well, tell me why there's not much you can do about it. Have you asked if there's something that we can do about it, right? But to that point, we know that there's things that at the central location that we might need to work on, right? We know also that we're part of the USM system. So are there things that we as central HR, we as a university, we have our controller in the room, as a university, when we look at that, are there things that we should be doing different or better? And we need to hear those suggestions from the schools and offices. So we've said that as well. Okay. I think that there were some questions or comments in the room. You got the microphone. Go ahead.
Back to your 3-year graph.
Okay.
The rise from 2022. I wonder how much of that is from people working from home.
Good point. Are you saying that you feel like the increase might be because people are satisfied with that hybrid remote work schedule?
Right, and they don't have coworkers so close. And they
don't have to be.
They have more free reign.
So that might be a really great thing. And maybe that's coming out in the survey. Yep. And we've asked people to identify those things, right? So when we talk about supervisors, people feeling supported by their supervisors, is that because, supervisors are allowing and encouraging that flexibility, right? But again, that's not the case. I do want to keep saying, because you see the increases here, as we get down to that school and office level, it's not always blue. There is pink in there, and we've addressed those areas with those schools and offices. Were you going to say something else?
So you have that data.
Yes, we have that data. Are you going to say something? No? Oh, okay. I thought, go ahead.
I just had a comment based on what Ayamba said related to encouraging increased participation in the survey. I think maybe one of the things that's occurring too is survey fatigue, because I know we receive a lot of, especially through the ELM, invitations to participate in surveys from different units, whether it's department specific, school specific, and then university wide. So I'm wondering if maybe when we know that we're going to be doing a survey that rises to this level, if we can identify that that's the one survey that's occurring at that time, or if we can maybe try to consolidate and minimize the number of survey requests that go out.
Yeah, thank you for that suggestion. And I have to say, we're kind of in that time of change. So like Diane said, so I came on board. I know her office is working on a lot. And one of the things that we're really trying to do is make sure that as we are moving forward, that we're doing so based on data, right? And I know that I am not the only office that's doing that. And like, so we had that whole PDP survey that came out right after this staff experience survey, right? And then we had our training needs assessment survey that came out. And I get it. And so we are trying to find the balance, because all across the university, we're a higher ed educational institution, right? And so that data piece is important. And so when people say, well, who did you ask about this? How did you know it's a problem? What feedback did we get? So I get it, but it's really important and valid point. And we are trying to do more of that, of sync, what surveys do we have going on. And I want to give a shout out to Laura's team under communications, because as we start looking at how we're going to communicate the information about the surveys, they will be like, well, you know, there's another survey coming out, right? And then we might have to push our timeline back because we know that, right? So we are trying to work on that. So please know that as well. But thank you for that comment. Yes, ma'am.
So I do want to highlight that I am engaged in a lot of things, and the two of you and your teams, I can see and feel the difference since you have come on board. So I do want to say thank you for that. And I know none of these things change in like a year or two. So
thank you.
I want to highlight that, and thank you.
Thank you.
This far. Question.
Hold on. Thank you so much. I just feel like we need to pause and say, thank you, girl. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thanks to my team. I have a great team.
Yes.
Thank you, Team
I think that we have the greatest teams, and they are people who are dedicated and passionate about the work that they do. It's when you have so much coming, as you all do in your departments, right? When you have so much coming, how do we prioritize? And I think that that's what our roles have come in and helped to do, help prioritize and give direction to that work. So thank you for noticing that.
So in terms of appropriateness, do you think it would be appropriate for your team to share this information with each school, as opposed to maybe waiting for the schools to share this information? So something like this that we have here, but school specific, so that way we're being transparent in a spirit of transparency. So we're not waiting for our leadership to say, we think now is a good time to share this information with you because we're too busy. Or because we have all these other things going on, because we're still waiting for information, right? But like, I'm thinking maybe if your team were able to just share this information, school specific, for an hour or so at your individual school, it might help in improving that level of transparency and folks' comfort.
Yep. And it's a fine line that we walk, right? So we know that we have the data, but we also don't want to dictate, yep, you need to invite us to a meeting so we can share it at your town hall, right? We understand that the schools and offices also have priorities. Like there was one school that we were talking to, and they were talking about some other surveys that they had going on and how they're trying to align it with this one and the information that's coming out. And now we also have the faculty survey, right? Which is why we're saying, please invite us. We want your people to have this information. And if you're not inviting us, if we need to do coaching sessions to make sure you're comfortable with being able to talk about the data, we will do that too. So, which is why I've gone to staff meetings. I think we've talked about this with the staff senate, with faculty members, with the women groups. We are trying to absolutely make our rounds so that people have the information. And even with our EDI officers and our HR managers and directors, giving them the information, because we know that a lot of times the schools and department, the staff, the employees, managers, supervisors are going to them. So we're trying to find that middle ground of saying, please invite us, know that we're there. We don't want to dictate, we don't want to push, but we're at the end of the day, we're still holding you accountable for giving us this information, even if we don't come to your school or department. Yes, Alex.
Well, I tell you, online, there is a mixture of appreciation for the transparency and a lot of skepticism that it's really going to happen. One person writes, how will the schools and departments prove that they communicated the information? I've never met with anyone in my school's dean's office, let alone speaking with them. Someone else writes, I'm still wondering about the transparency. Will the staff be able to see department or even school level data? And what if we don't hear anything from our schools or departments? When should we reach out to someone to ask for updates? And there are many more comments, people saying, yeah, they'd like to see you push that data out there to make sure it happens.
Okay. I'm sorry, Diane, were you going to say? Yes, so we will, and I know that we have been following up with the HR, but I think that we probably just need to take it a step further and have a follow-up conversation with our leaders. So we will capture those comments, right? Alex, you will send us those comments that we are getting in the chat?
Oh yeah, you'll get all the comments.
Okay, wonderful. Because what we can then do is say, okay, we've heard from these schools and employees that nothing has been shared. Give us a status update. We'll shoot out some emails. We'll also talk to senior leaders to do that follow-up. So thank you for bringing that forward. And if you're not hearing anything, we do need to know, because again, that was the whole point in us talking to senior leaders, getting their buy-in. And I know, and I did want to mention, there have been several of them who have talked about how do we get our participation rate up? We need to hear, although it's acceptable, the 36% is acceptable, it's not acceptable for us. So we have heard schools and departments say that. I did want to say that.
And we do have, I don't have the link right away, but we do have a staff experience website, and this presentation will be posted there. This is for all universe, and we will talk with our deans and VPs about the extent to which we can put department or school level data there as well. We're at time.
Any other questions before we wrap it up? Yes.
So I could add one more thing. An anonymous attendee wrote I'll try to make it short. It's a long question, but basically it's about, are you going to address the telework policy? When the policy was rolled out, employees pushed back and asked for a more lenient policy. We were told that the committee, let's see, that it would be rolled out and address employee satisfaction. But at least to this person's satisfaction, that hasn't been done.
So
people who have commented about the telework policy.
Nope. Thanks for bringing that up. So also remember that we have our future of work, another survey and committee that we're working on, right? And that committee was the task force was a representative group of employees, and they had, based upon the survey results, and telework was a huge one that came up with the future of work. And they have come up with a lot of recommendations based upon the survey, the listening sessions that we did, the background information materials, studies of peer institutions. So know that we will be coming back to share those recommendations, and that they will also be going to senior leaders because they've made recommendations regarding future of work, telework, hybrid work schedule. And I know that that's on that list. So I did want to mention that.
I don't want to forget, because people have asked, how can they see the data? How can everyone else who wasn't at this meeting, how can they see the data? Is it posted on a website somewhere?
As Diane said, we will be posting this to our staff experience. There is a link, and we can send that out. We'll put it in the Elm, but we will send that out, and everyone will have access to the link, because we do want to make sure that everyone has access. Again, if you didn't get your question or your comment in, feel free to email Diane or myself. We really appreciate the feedback. Because if we don't have it, we don't know to move different, right? To think different, to move different. So thank you so much for your feedback and your input today. Diane, did you want to say anything?
Thank you all. Great job.
Alex, thank you. I think we're good. We good? Everybody good? All right. Thank you all.